I know this is difficult, but the estate sale papers need your signature today. Just sign here.
How can you do this right now?
My parents decided to sell my grandmother's farm before the flowers on her grave were even dry. And somehow, they still expected me to smile, sit quietly, and sign the papers like the obedient daughter they had ignored my entire life. Rain poured across the church parking lot outside Asheville, North Carolina, while mourners slowly disappeared into their cars. The mountains behind the cemetery were buried beneath gray fog, and cold wind carried the smell of wet grass and funeral lilies through the air. I stood beside my mother near the stone steps of the church, holding Grandma Eleanor's folded sweater against my chest. It still smelled faintly like lavender. My mother barely looked at me. "We'll meet at the house in an hour," she said while fixing her umbrella. "Your father and Marcus need to discuss the property situation." The property situation. Not Grandma's death. Not grief. Not family. Property. Before I could answer, my older brother Marcus stepped beside my father with the confident smile he always wore whenever money was involved. "There's no reason dragging this out," Marcus said calmly. "Blue Ridge Horizon is ready to move fast." Dad nodded immediately. "We're lucky your brother found buyers this quickly." I stood there stunned while cold rain splashed against my shoes. Grandma Eleanor had been buried less than 2 hours ago. Marcus glanced toward me like I was a child slowing down an adult conversation. "Natalie," he said patiently, "the farm is falling apart anyway. Selling is the smart decision." Smart. That word again. My entire life, my family used that word whenever they wanted me to accept unfair treatment quietly. Marcus getting a new car at 17 while I worked part-time after school was smart. Marcus receiving help for college while I took community classes nearby was smart. Marcus being allowed to chase expensive business ideas while I stayed home helping Grandma Eleanor after Grandpa Walter died was smart. And every single time I tried speaking up, my mother gave me the same disappointed look. "Stop being emotional." Emotional. That was the role they gave me years ago. Marcus was the successful son. I was the sensitive daughter, who cared too much about memories. But standing there in the rain beside Grandma's fresh grave, something inside me finally cracked. Because Maple Creek Farm was never just land to me. It was the only place in my entire life where I felt wanted. When I was 13, Grandma Eleanor taught me how to repair broken fencing while cicadas screamed through the summer heat. Grandpa Walter taught me how to test soil between my fingers before planting. At the farmhouse kitchen table, they listened when I spoke. Really listened. Nobody rushed me there, nobody compared me to Marcus, nobody made me feel small. Grandma used to say, "A house tells you exactly who loves it by who takes care of it when nobody is watching." Marcus never cared for the farm. He cared about what it could become after bulldozers destroyed it. That evening, I drove alone to Maple Creek Farm while the storm darkened the mountains around me. The old farmhouse sat silent beneath towering oak trees, porch light glowing softly through the rain. For several minutes, I just sat in the car crying. Not loud. Not dramatic. The kind of crying that comes from being tired for too many years. Tired of being overlooked, tired of never being chosen first, tired of pretending unfairness did not hurt. Inside the farmhouse, everything still looked exactly the same. Grandma's reading glasses rested beside her chair. Grandpa's boots still sat near the back door. A half-finished grocery list remained on the kitchen counter written in Grandma Eleanor's careful handwriting. Milk, coffee. Natalie's favorite peach tea. My throat tightened so painfully I had to sit down. That was when I noticed the loose floorboard beneath Grandma's bedroom closet. At first, I almost ignored it. Then I remembered something suddenly. 3 weeks before she died, Grandma Eleanor grabbed my wrist while I helped her fold laundry. "Some things in this family stay hidden until the right person is ready," she whispered. My pulse quickened. I knelt slowly and lifted the loose board. Underneath sat a rusted tin box. Inside was a silver key, legal papers, and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. "Natalie. If your parents are trying to sell, The farm already, then everything happened exactly as I feared. My hand started trembling before I even opened the letter. Because deep down, I already knew this box contained something my family never imagined I had. Power. I did not sleep that night. Rain tapped against the farmhouse windows while I sat alone at Grandma Eleanor's kitchen table staring at the papers spread out beneath the yellow overhead light. The old clock above the refrigerator ticked softly through the silence. Every sound felt louder after death. Especially truth. The envelope contained more than a letter. There was a bank key, several legal documents I barely understood, and one business card. Helen Mercer, estate attorney. At the bottom of the card, Grandma had written 4 words in blue ink. She will explain everything. I checked the time. 3:15 in the morning. Part of me wanted to wait until daylight. The other part remembered Marcus smiling beside Grandma's grave while talking about buyers. I called immediately. To my shock, Helen answered after the second ring. Her voice sounded calm. Awake. Almost like she had been expecting me. Natalie Bennett? She asked gently. My stomach tightened. How did you know it was me? A small pause. Because your grandmother made me promise I would answer no matter what time you called. The tears hit instantly. Not loud tears. The dangerous kind that silently break your heart open from the inside. Helen asked where I was. At the farm. Good, she said quickly. Stay there. I'll drive up in the morning. The line disconnected. Outside, thunder rolled through the mountains while I sat frozen in Grandpa Walter's old wooden chair trying to understand why Grandma Eleanor had prepared for this so carefully. Why she sounded afraid. And why somehow. I already knew the answer. Helen arrived shortly after 9 the next morning in a dark blue sedan covered with rainwater and mountain mud. She looked to be around 70, elegant in a quiet way. Silver hair pulled back neatly. Sharp, intelligent eyes that noticed everything immediately. The moment she stepped into the farmhouse kitchen, her expression softened. She loved this place, Helen whispered. I nodded silently. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Helen placed a thick leather folder onto the table. Your grandmother created an irrevocable trust nearly 8 years ago. My heartbeat immediately sped up. What exactly does that mean? It means, Helen said carefully, Maple Creek Farm does not legally belong to your parents. The room suddenly felt colder. I stared at her. My father thinks it does. Your father was never informed about the trust. I blinked in confusion. You mean Grandma hid this from them? Helen met my eyes directly. She hid it from everyone except you. The words landed hard. My entire life, I had been the invisible daughter. The one who got hand-me-down furniture while Marcus got new bedroom sets, the one told to understand family finances. The one expected to sacrifice quietly whenever money became tight. And somehow, Grandma Eleanor chose me. Helen opened the folder slowly and turned several pages toward me. Property deeds, investment accounts, trust documentation. Then I saw my own name typed clearly across the page. Primary beneficiary, Natalie Grace Bennett. My breathing became uneven. How much is all this worth? Helen hesitated briefly. Approximately $4.6 million. I nearly dropped the papers. $4.6 million. The farmhouse, the orchard, the surrounding acreage, investment funds. Everything. A dizzy feeling swept through me. Not because of greed. Because suddenly my family's behavior made horrifying sense. The pressure, the manipulation, the sudden urgency after Grandma's death. Marcus already knew the land was worth millions. Helen removed another document from the folder. There's more. My chest tightened again. Over the last 6 months, someone has repeatedly attempted to access ownership records connected to the property. I already knew the answer before asking. Marcus? We strongly suspect so. A heavy silence settled between us. Then Helen slid forward what looked like copied signatures. There are indications forged transfer documents may already exist. I stared at the page in disbelief. You mean fake signatures? Yes. The word echoed through the kitchen like something rotten finally exposed to sunlight. I suddenly remembered hearing Marcus arguing with Dad 3 weeks earlier in the garage. She'll sign eventually, Marcus snapped angrily. At the time, I thought they were discussing debt. Now I understood. They had already decided the farm belonged to them before Grandma Eleanor was even buried. Helen folded her hands carefully. Your grandmother feared this exact situation. I looked around the kitchen slowly. Grandma's peach tea still sat inside the cabinet, her gardening gloves still hung beside the back door. Everything looked normal. But nothing was normal anymore. For the first time in my life, I realized something painful. My parents never ignored me because I lacked value. They ignored me because quiet people are easier to underestimate. And Grandma Eleanor. She used that mistake to protect me. 3 days after Grandma Eleanor's funeral, my parents suddenly started acting nice to me. That should have been my first warning. My mother cooked my favorite dinner for the first time in years. Candles glowed softly across the dining table while the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filled the house. Dad even asked about my classes at community college like he genuinely cared about the answer. Marcus arrived 30 minutes late wearing a tailored gray coat and carrying a leather folder under his arm. The moment I saw the folder, my stomach tightened. This was not dinner. It was an ambush. Natalie, Mom said warmly while pouring sweet tea into my glass, we're worried about you being alone out at the farm so much. Alone. Interesting choice of word. Nobody worried when I spent years helping Grandma Eleanor clean the farmhouse, repair fences, and drive her to medical appointments while Marcus traveled for business. Back then, my time had no value. Now suddenly everyone cared. I forced a small smile and stayed quiet. That seemed to encourage them. Dad leaned back in his chair with a heavy sigh. You know the family's under pressure financially. There it was. Money. Always money. Marcus opened the leather folder smoothly and spread several papers across the table like a salesman preparing a pitch. Blue Ridge Horizon. Increased their offer, he said proudly. $4.8 million. Mom inhaled softly like the number itself could solve every problem in her life. Dad nodded toward me. This changes everything for all of us. I stared at the paperwork without touching it. Outside, rain rolled slowly down the dining room windows while thunder echoed faintly through the mountains. The house suddenly felt smaller somehow. Tighter. Like all the air had been replaced by pressure. Marcus pointed toward one of the contracts. If we move fast, Mom and Dad keep the house. Dad clears his debts. Everyone gets stability. Everyone. Interesting word. Because growing up, everyone somehow never included me. When Marcus crashed his car at 19, Dad emptied savings to help him. When I needed help paying tuition, Mom told me to take fewer classes and be realistic. Marcus got opportunities. I got lectures about sacrifice. Dad folded his hands together carefully. Natalie, sweetheart, we need you to think about family. I almost laughed. Family. The same family who forgot my birthday 2 years in a row, the same family who turned every achievement of mine into a comparison with Marcus, the same family who treated me like background furniture until Grandma Eleanor left behind something valuable. Marcus slid a pen toward me. We can finalize tonight. I looked at the pen but did not move. Inside my jacket pocket rested copies of the trust documents Helen Mercer gave me the day before. My family believed they were cornering the weak daughter who always stayed quiet. None of them realized Grandma Eleanor had already handed me the power to destroy their entire plan. Mom's voice softened. Honey, we know this is emotional for you. Emotional. Again that word. Marcus leaned closer. You loved Grandma. I get that. But she would want the family taken care of. No, I said quietly. The room fell silent. Marcus blinked. What? I looked directly at him for the first time all evening. You don't get to tell me what Grandma wanted. His jaw tightened immediately. Dad's expression darkened. Natalie, he warned. But years of silence were finally breaking apart inside me. She spent years asking me to protect that farm while all of you talked about selling it. Mom's face changed instantly. Almost guilty. Marcus laughed once under his breath. You seriously think Grandpa's broken farm matters more than this family? I stared at him calmly. You mean more than your debts? The color drained from Marcus's face. Dad turned sharply toward him. What debts? Marcus stood too quickly. Don't start this now. But I already saw it. Fear. Real fear. Not fear of losing memories. Fear of losing money he already promised someone else. Suddenly every rushed conversation made sense, every phone call, every secret meeting, every fake smile after the funeral. Marcus had already made deals behind everyone's backs. And he needed my signature to save himself. Dad slowly stood from the table. You already signed something, didn't you? Marcus stayed silent. That silence told us everything. Mom looked horrified. You said nothing was final. Marcus snapped angrily, because it would have been fine if she just cooperated. She. Not Natalie, not sister. Just obstacle. The room exploded into shouting after that, but strangely, I felt calm. Because for the first time in my life, I was no longer the ignored daughter sitting quietly at the edge of the table. I was the one holding the future of the entire family in my hands. And nobody there understood how dangerous that truly was. The next morning, my father acted like the argument at dinner never happened. He sat at the kitchen counter drinking black coffee while the morning news played softly in the background. My mother moved around the kitchen in silence, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Only Marcus looked nervous. He checked his phone constantly, tapped his fingers against the table, kept glancing toward the clock above the stove. For the first time in my life, my brother looked uncertain. And somehow that frightened me more than his anger ever had. At 8:15 in the morning, Marcus grabbed his leather folder and car keys. Dad stood immediately. I'm coming with you. Marcus hesitated. Just for half a second. That tiny pause told me everything. He had hidden more from Dad than I realized. Before leaving, Marcus finally looked toward me. You still have time to stop this. I met his stare calmly. No, I said softly. You do. His jaw tightened hard enough to show through his skin. Then he slammed the front door behind him. The house fell silent again. Mom stood frozen beside the sink, clutching a dish towel in trembling hands. You don't understand what's happening, she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. No, I answered quietly. I finally do. An hour later, my phone rang. Helen Mercer. I stepped outside onto the back porch before answering. Cold mountain wind moved through the trees around Maple Creek Farm while dark clouds rolled low across the hills. It's done, Helen said calmly. My heartbeat quickened. They tried filing the transfer papers this morning. And? I heard papers shuffling softly on her desk. The county clerk informed them the property has belonged to the Eleanor Bennett Irrevocable Trust for 8 years. I closed my eyes slowly. Grandma Eleanor had really done it. All those years of silence, all those years of watching my family underestimate me. She planned everything. Helen continued speaking. Your brother attempted arguing with the clerk. Loudly. Despite everything, a small painful laugh escaped my throat. That sounded exactly like Marcus. When the clerk refused the filing, Helen continued, your father demanded proof. A heavy feeling settled into my chest. Dad truly did not know. Not fully. Marcus had been leading everyone blindly toward disaster. Then Helen's voice lowered carefully. There's another problem. Fear instantly tightened my stomach. What kind of problem? The forged signatures attached to the preliminary transfer forms triggered a fraud review. I stopped breathing. What? We believe your brother used copied signatures from older property documents. Cold shock spread through my body. Marcus had not only planned to pressure me into signing. He already prepared fake paperwork in case I refused. For several seconds, I could not speak at all. Then my phone buzzed again. Incoming call, Dad. I answered immediately. His breathing sounded uneven. What did you do? He demanded. Not angry. Panicked. I looked out. Across the orchard where wind bent the tall grass beneath darkening skies. I protected Grandma's farm. You went behind our backs? No, I said quietly. Grandma went behind yours. Silence exploded across the line. Then Dad whispered something that hurt more than yelling ever could. She trusted you more than us? My eyes burned instantly. Because underneath the anger in his voice was something worse. Realization. The painful realization that his own mother saw something in his daughter he failed to see himself. Dad's voice cracked slightly. We're going to lose everything. There it was. The truth. Not grief, not family unity, not preserving memories. Money. Always money. The hardware business debt is over $500,000, he admitted quietly. The farm was supposed to save us. I swallowed hard. For one dangerous second, guilt crept into my chest. I knew my parents were struggling. I knew Mom stayed awake at night crying over bills. I knew Dad mortgaged almost everything trying to keep the business alive. But none of that erased what they had done to me. None of it erased years of being treated like less. You chose Marcus every single time, I whispered before I could stop myself. Dad went silent. When he failed, you rescued him. When I needed help, you told me to sacrifice for the family. My throat tightened painfully now. Do you know what Grandma gave me that nobody else ever did? Dad did not answer. She made me feel important. Complete silence. Then, very softly, I heard my father begin to cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one broken sound from a man finally realizing how badly he failed his daughter. The line disconnected a few seconds later. That afternoon, news about the failed land deal spread through town faster than wildfire. Blue Ridge Horizon threatened legal action against Marcus, the fraud review became official, and suddenly my successful older brother stopped looking untouchable. Meanwhile, I stood alone on Grandma Eleanor's porch watching storm clouds move over the mountains while the orchard swayed beneath the wind. For the first time in my life, I was no longer the invisible daughter waiting for permission to matter. Now I was the one holding the future. 2 months after the truth came out, Maple Creek Farm finally felt quiet again. Not empty. Not lonely. Just peaceful. The kind of peace that only comes after something painful finally stops fighting to survive. Early autumn settled softly across the mountains outside Asheville. Golden leaves drifted through the orchard while cold morning mist rolled slowly over the fields behind the farmhouse. The air smelled like damp earth, apples, and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Every morning, I woke before sunrise and walked the property alone. At first, it hurt. Every corner of the farm carried memories of Grandma Eleanor. Her gardening gloves still hung beside the back door, her favorite coffee mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet, even the old porch swing creaked the same way it had when she used to sit beside me at sunset talking about weather and apple harvests. But slowly, the grief changed. It stopped feeling sharp. Instead, it became something quieter, something warmer. Like she was still there somehow. The farmhouse needed repairs everywhere. The roof above the barn leaked badly during storms. Half the fencing near the north pasture leaned sideways after years of neglect. The orchard itself needed pruning before winter arrived. So I worked. Every day. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. For the first time in my life, nobody was telling me I cared too much, nobody mocked me for being emotional, nobody compared me to Marcus. The silence healed parts of me I did not realize were broken. Meanwhile, everything outside the farm continued collapsing. Blue Ridge Horizon officially sued Marcus for fraud and financial damages connected to the failed land deal. His real estate license was suspended indefinitely while investigators reviewed forged signatures tied to the property documents. People in town stopped talking about him with admiration. Now they talked quietly, carefully. Like his name carried embarrassment. Dad eventually sold the hardware store at a massive loss. Mom returned to working full-time at the pharmacy after nearly 15 years away from the job. And somehow, seeing them struggle hurt more than I expected. Not because they were innocent. Because they were human. That was the hardest lesson of all. People can fail you terribly and still be people you love. One cold Sunday afternoon, my younger cousin Emma drove out to the farm carrying grocery bags and 2 cups of hot cider. She stood awkwardly near the porch steps. "I didn't know if you wanted company," she admitted softly. I smiled for the first time all week. "I do." We spent hours sitting on Grandma Eleanor's porch wrapped in blankets while wind moved through the apple trees below. Emma eventually looked toward me carefully. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Did you always know Grandma trusted you more?" The question caught me off guard. I stared out across the orchard for several seconds before answering. "No," I whispered. "I spent most of my life believing I mattered less." Saying the words out loud hurt. Because they were true. Emma's eyes softened. "They should have treated you better." A painful lump rose into my throat. For years, I waited for my parents to notice me the way they noticed Marcus. Celebrate me. Choose me first just once. But Grandma Eleanor already had. And maybe that was why losing her hurt so deeply. Before sunset, Emma helped me clean the old storage barn behind the orchard. Dust floated through narrow beams of golden light while we sorted boxes filled with Grandpa Walter's tools and faded family photographs. That was when I found the final letter. Hidden beneath a loose board inside Grandpa's old workbench. My hands trembled before I even opened it. "Natalie. If you are reading this, then the farm survived. So did you." Tears blurred my vision instantly. "You spent your whole life believing quiet love mattered less than loud confidence. But loud people do not always protect what matters. Sometimes the gentlest hands become the strongest ones." I covered my mouth trying not to cry. Emma wrapped her arms around me while evening sunlight poured through the barn walls around us. At the bottom of the letter, Grandma Eleanor wrote one final sentence. "You were never hard to love, Natalie. You were simply surrounded by people too distracted to see you clearly." I broke completely. After reading that. Not because of the money, not because of the farm. Because for the first time in my entire life, I felt chosen. The next morning, I stood alone beside the orchard watching sunrise spread gold across Maple Creek Farm. Cold wind moved softly through the trees while mist floated above the grass. And standing there beneath the same sky Grandma Eleanor once loved, I finally understood something that changed me forever. Some children grow up fighting to be noticed. Others grow up quietly learning how to survive being overlooked. But sometimes, the ones nobody values become the ones strong enough to protect everything that truly matters. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and tell me whether you've ever felt unseen by the people who were supposed to love you most. And if you enjoy emotional stories about family betrayal, quiet strength, and unexpected justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again here on Waters Payback for the next story.